Hello and welcome to the next instalment of On the Road. This is part 2. I am heading east out of Goulburn towards the village of Tarago, which is about 42 kilometres or 45 kilometres from Goulburn. At the end of this clip, at about 14 and a half minutes, I'll get to Tarago, make a right turn at the Loaded Dog Hotel, and then be riding in the direction of Bungendore, which is a small town between Tarago and Queanbeyan. So I'm on the Braidwood Road, and at the various points along here you'll be able to see for yourself the state of the road. I've talked about it before, and there are parts of it that are in fairly good condition, and there are some parts of it that need some work, and there are places where I can see there has been some work, so shoulders have been fixed, and it's just there are guardrails, markings and all those sort of things you expect to see on a good road. At other places there is still work to be done. So I'm going to talk about a topic that I talk a lot about in these motorcycle videos, and that is to do with safety. But before I do, a couple of disclaimers. Number one, I am not a lawyer, so anything I say here should not be considered legal advice. I'm not offering legal advice, I'm merely offering my own opinion based on what I understand to be the situation. Further, I am not a police officer, I've never worked for the police department, and I don't know anything about their procedures or processes, and not privy to any of their manuals or day-to-day operating, standard operating procedures and so on. I'm only talking about things that I think I know and understand. So if you are still watching and listening after the first 30 seconds of this video, which is generally about how long people pay attention to them for, and you hear me say something that is legally and factually incorrect, then I welcome your corrections in the comments, and I'll acknowledge them when I become aware of them. Now, I talk a lot about safety. I've talked about it quite a few times before, and in a recent video I talked about the implications of individuals who drive while they're unlicensed or disqualified from driving, individuals who drive cars when the car is unregistered, or individuals who drive when the vehicle they drive is unroadworthy. Now, there are consequences for the individuals who commit these offences. Sorry, before I go any further, I should also say that anything I say here is neither a justification or an explanation nor a criticism of any police department. They have their own resources to explain their behaviour and justify their behaviour, and there are people who are eminently more qualified than I am to criticise the police when they misuse or overuse or overreach their powers. I'm just talking about things as I understand them. So to return to the topic of consequences for people who drive while they're unlicensed and so on, there are consequences and implications for those people, and there can be quite serious implications for the people who may be injured as a result of an unlicensed driver or an unregistered vehicle or an unroadworthy vehicle. In Australia we have 6 states and 2 territories, and each state or territory has its own police service. It might be called the police service or the police force, or it might just be called the New South Wales Police, for example, or Victoria Police. But every little town and village and city does not have a police force like they do in the United States. We have a state police service or a state police force, and that body is uniform across the state in terms of its training and in terms of the rules and regulations that it has to follow. When the parliaments in Australia pass a law or amend a law regarding the movement of vehicles on roads or the behaviour of drivers in those vehicles, it is the police, or the police are the body that is charged with enforcing that law. So if the government of the day introduces a bill that says certain people can't drive certain cars, for example, people on provisional licences can't drive high-powered cars, they can't drive cars with turbochargers and things like that, then it's the police who are responsible for policing that law, and they have a number of tools, if you like, in the arsenal of things that they are allowed to do. They can stop you and issue with an on-the-spot infringement notice, which will say that you've been fined a certain amount of money for whatever offence it is that you've committed. Say if you're speeding and you're within, say, 5 or 10 kilometres over the speed limit, you'll be fined a certain amount. If you're 20 to 30 kilometres over, you'll be fined a certain amount more. It'll say that on the notice that you're given, and it'll also say that you've attracted a certain number of demerit points. There are options for contesting that in court and so on. For some other offences, you will be given a notice that says you have to appear in court. So, for example, if you fail a roadside breath test and then you fail the blood analysis as well, you'll be given a notice that says you have to appear in court, and based on the evidence that's presented by the police and how good your lawyer is, the magistrate will make a determination and you will receive a disqualification of your licence for a period of time, a monetary penalty, in other words a fine, and in most states now you will also be required to have an interlock placed on your vehicle. Now in Australia, because of the influence of American television shows, we hear words like probable cause, reasonable suspicion and so on. I don't know if those terms have any meaning in Australian legal language, but as I say, the police are given powers to enforce the road laws and the traffic laws and so on, and to do that they're allowed to stop you. In other words, you can be driving along the road and apparently minding your own business, driving according to the road rules, not exceeding the speed limit, have your seatbelt on, all those sorts of things, and a police officer is allowed to stop you. And the other day I was watching one of those reality TV shows with the police. I think it's made by the Victoria Police, and it might be called Highway Patrol or Motorcycle Cops or something like that. And two police officers pulled over a car that they said was driving erratically. When they pulled the car over, the driver got out of the car and he proceeded to complain about police harassment. Now the person who spoke to him, who was a woman, said, we are entitled to check licences, registration and vehicles. That's our job, and that's in fact what they're allowed to do. So the police officer is allowed, as I understand it, is allowed to pull you over at any time to do a random licence check. That is to see that you are a licensed driver. In all states and territories you are required to carry, as I understand it, you are required to carry your licence with you and can be required to produce it to a police officer when asked. In some states, New South Wales is the one that I know of, they have digital licences which you can have on your phone. Other states do not have digital licences, and other states do not accept digital licences from interstate as proof of identity. So if you're travelling interstate, you can have your licence on your phone, but it's also a good idea to carry the physical licence, the actual card. So the police officer can stop you and ask you for your licence, and on that basis to check whether the licence is valid and you are a licensed driver. At the same time, they can run the number plate from the car you're driving to determine A, if you're the registered owner, and if in fact the registration is paid and current, and if you're not the registered owner, are you using the vehicle with the permission of the registered owner? Now, hypothetically, if you weren't, then you could be charged with driving a stolen vehicle. In other words, if you did not have the permission of the owner to drive the car, the police could assume that you had stolen the vehicle and could charge you with driving a stolen vehicle. So they may ask you, if you're not the registered owner, who is the registered owner? Do you have the details of that person? And they may contact the person and say, do you know that so-and-so is driving your car? Going back to the licence for a moment, if you don't have your licence when the officer pulls you over, I believe you have 24 hours to produce it to the nearest police station to substantiate whatever information you give him at the traffic stop, or her for that matter. The other reason they're allowed to pull you over is that they establish that the vehicle is yours, that it's registered, the registration is current, is they're allowed to do a random vehicle check. In all states except New South Wales, when your vehicle is due for registration, the appropriate government department sends you a renewal notice about 1 month before it's due. You pay all the charges and your vehicle's registered. In New South Wales, after your vehicle is 5 years old, you have to have it inspected every year to make sure that it's roadworthy. Once you've had that certificate issued, you pay all the other charges and your vehicle is registered. But at any time in that 12 months, the vehicle could become unroadworthy. For example, the tyres might have been okay at registration, but then later on they may show wear and be unsafe. the brakes might stop working, the exhaust system might start leaking gas into the noxious gases into the car somewhere, the windscreen wipers might not work, lights might not work, oil might start leaking out of it. All of those are things that could happen. So a police officer is entitled to, once they've stopped your car, to inspect your car to see if it's roadworthy. If it's not roadworthy, they can issue you with a defect notice then and there on the spot and say, well, you've got 14 days to take care of whatever it is, or a period of time. It might be 14 days, might be 28 days, might be 30 days. For example, you might have a headlight that's dud, that doesn't stop working. So you might have a period of time in which you have to get that headlight fixed. If you don't do it after that, then the police will be entitled to stop you again and possibly impound the vehicle and fine you for failing to obey a notice to repair your vehicle. If the vehicle is deemed so unroadworthy that it's unsafe to drive, they can order you to leave the vehicle at the side of the road and make an alternative way home, or they can call for a tow truck and have the car towed to an impound yard, where you will have to pay a fee to get it out of the impound yard and get those repairs attended to before it's allowed to be back on the road. Now all of this is leading to me saying, when I get on my bike or in my car or whatever, I want to be able to go from wherever I am to wherever I want to go and back home to where I started from in safety. I want other people to do that as well. All of us at the moment, or most of us, 99% of us are driving around in vehicles that contain highly combustible liquid, that is petrol or diesel, and the potential for catastrophic injury is great should there be a collision. I don't know how many millions or billions of kilometres are travelled in Australia every year, and I don't know how many accidents there are relative to those billions of kilometres. I know there are something like 12 million light passenger vehicles in Australia, so that's one for every two people almost. And I want to think, when I'm out on the road, that everybody else is driving a safe vehicle, that I'm driving a safe vehicle, and that I'm doing my best to get to where I'm going safely, and that I'm conscious of the fact that other people are on the road, and I'm having regard for their safety as well. I want other people to have regard for my safety as well. And so, whilst I admit myself that I would not be happy if I was pulled up by the police, I'd be apprehensive even if I wasn't speeding, had my licence, my vehicles were registered, I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing, I would still be apprehensive about being put up by the police, because that's just the nature of the business. A policeman comes to you and he or she's in a uniform, they have a utility belt with weapons and handcuffs and pepper spray and things like that, and you think, well, I've done nothing wrong, but who knows what's going to happen here, so I'll just be very careful. What I'm saying to you is, if you are pulled up, the police are entitled to pull you up, they're entitled to ask you certain questions, they're entitled to ask for certain documents to prove that you're the owner of the vehicle, and the best advice I would give you, and bearing in mind, as I said, I'm not a lawyer, is that you speak politely to them. Don't make any admissions of anything. They ask you how fast you're going, say, no officer, I was paying attention to the road, not the speedo or something. Don't be smart aleck, but just say, no, I wasn't aware of how fast I was going. And if they issue you with a fine or an infringement notice or whatever, accept it, and then you can argue it in court if you want. Go and see a lawyer and get some advice if you think that's appropriate, but arcing up about what you think your rights might be and what you think you're allowed to do probably isn't going to help your cause very much. So that's my talk about safety, and my talk about interactions with the police on the road. Drive safely, make sure your vehicle's registered, carry your licence with you at all times. If you're not the owner of the vehicle, make sure you have the permission of the owner before you set off in the bike. Drive to the speed limit, be aware of other people on the road, and if you do all those things, you probably won't have any problems with the police. Well, thank you for watching and thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed my talk, and I will talk to you again shortly.